In fact, today's topic is kind of about those issues. Today we're going to talk about understanding DNA. And some of this is going to be what I would call biology 101, going back to our old classes in grade school and middle school and high school and some college, and some people even, postgraduate. But the reality of it is you need that basic understanding to understand where genetics is headed. Most importantly, how to apply what we're learning about genetics so that you can get the results that you're looking for. So let's kind of dive in. First and foremost, probably the most important thing to take away from this presentation is that you are unique. Even if you have a twin, you are in your own way unique. There's something that makes you just a little bit different, something that makes it so that you may need something a little bit different than the next person. What the reality of that means is there is no one-size-fits-all solution to everything that we're dealing with in life, from our diet to our lifestyle to the environments in which we expose ourselves to where we live, to our taste in food, to what color our eyes are, to how we respond to certain stimuli. All of that is determined, for the most part, on a genetic basis. And we are learning more and more of that on a daily basis. In fact, what we know for sure is that we're all about 99.5% the same. But that 0.5%, man, that makes a big difference. And where that comes from is our genes, and most importantly, our DNA. So first, what is DNA? And, when we were preparing for this presentation, one of the things we found was this quote, which I think is kind of a good telling quote of what is DNA. Because in essence, it is a history book, a narrative of the journey of our species through time, but most importantly, a narrative of the journey of your ancestors through time. We are kind of a make-up of our ancestors and where we came from. But it's also a shop manual with an incredibly detailed blueprint for building every human cell. As we go through today, you're going to see how that manual is put together. And as we evolve into our understanding of what our genome looks like and how to interpret the different markers that are in it that we're going to talk about, one of the things that you're going to understand is that by unwinding that information, you very well may have your own manual that can provide you some information that can be very valuable to you. But also, it's a transformative textbook of medicine with insights that will give healthcare providers immense new powers to treat, prevent, cure disease. The advent of personalized medicine is basically on the forefront of every topic. It is going to be the history of what it is that we're dealing with when it comes to disease in this country. It is going to be such that you are going to have a genetic protocol that is going to dictate how diseases are treated in you. So that if you have diabetes or heart disease or cancer or anything else, based upon your genetic makeup, that genetic makeup will dictate the medical protocol that is followed to treat, cure, and or prevent that disease. That's where we're headed. And, we're going to see this in our lifetime. It is going to happen at a very rapid pace. It seems like it's happening constantly. So when we look at DNA, most of us understand that this is generally what it looks like. But not a lot of people have the basic understanding of how it's all connected together and what this means and what this symbol is a part of. So let's zoom in a little bit. First, you have what's called major grooves and minor grooves. As you see, the major grooves are just that. They're the longer ones. The minor grooves are just that. They're the small twists. Made up of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. The other thing that you need to understand is the connective components of the DNA. And the connective components are usually identified as the building blocks or the bases, if you will. And they're usually identified as a single letter, C, G, A, and T. But really what it is C stands for cytosine, G, guanine, A, adenine, and T, thymine. But what happens is A is always connected to T, and C is always connected to G. So if you want to, green and blue are always together and red and yellow are always together. That's kind of the way that they are connected. And if somebody asks you, what does DNA stand for? It's deoxyribonucleic acid. Do you ever need to know that ever in your life? Probably not. In fact, I'm in my late 40s. I can still remember going through biology class, or I should say sleeping through biology class. And when DNA came up, I would have never thought in my lifetime would I ever need to know what DNA stood for. I can remember trying to remember how to spell it. Wasn't always the greatest speller. But it is enough to know that you are made up of this stuff. What does it look like? No, it looks like this. If you actually looked at your raw code, it is in some eerie resemblance of how code is in computers. The zeros and ones were basically G's, A's, T's, and C's. It's amazing how that kind of works out. But what's happening to us as we evolve and realize that humans are constantly evolving is we have these things called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. The polymorphism is basically the presence of a genetic variation within a population upon which natural selection can operate. If you remember natural selection from your Darwin history lessons, survival of the fittest type things, basically we evolve as our conditions changed, our diet, our lifestyle, our environment, our exposure to toxins and chemicals, etc. changes. These SNPs start to appear. Now, what's interesting about that is the polymorphism simply means that it is different than what was expected to be seen in that sequence. In other words, there's an expected, based upon the population, a certain outcome that was, or a code, if you will, that was expected to be seen, but your code varies. That variance, that 0.5% variance, is what makes you you. In fact, it's as simple as this. When you're looking at this long sequence of code, that G results in a gene that looks like the one on the right. If there's a T in that spot as opposed to a G, then of course it looks like the one the right of that code. So that's how we get to genetic expression. This is based upon these SNPs is what certain things happen. And it's not just expression in the sense of, you have brown hair instead of blonde or blue eyes instead of brown. That is part of it. But you also have, how you respond to bitter taste, whether or not you're going to be tall or short, how you metabolize certain nutrients. And there's a lot of other factors included in that. But SNPs are becoming more and more common, and there is more and more polymorphisms being identified as we learn more and more about genetics. A lot of it, though, is probably tied to this. See, for the first time in history, chronic illness has now surpassed infection diseases as the top killer of humans. That's scary. Viruses aren't the thing that's necessarily getting us anymore. It's chronic illness. We are literally eating ourselves to death, exposing ourselves to death. We are doing these things to ourselves. How? Well, pesticides, overpopulation, chemicals in our food, yes, cosmetics, plastics, the food that we're consuming, the meat that we're eating based upon what we're feeding the meat sources. A lot of this is starting to affect us. How bad is the situation? Well, the average household is using 25 gallons of chemicals in their home every year. Let that set in for just a second. That means you're using a half gallon, in essence, a week of chemicals that you're exposing yourself to. What is that resulting in? Well, it's resulting in all kinds of different blood and cardiovascular toxins, respiratory toxins, reproductive toxins, neurotoxins. All of our body's organs, tissues, and systems are being inundated with these chemicals. And as a result, what is happening is our bodies are starting to change genetically as we go from generation to generation to generation. The evolution of our bodies are changing. Our genetic codes are starting to change. Those SNPs are becoming more and more common. But the thing that you need to understand about all of these contaminants and things that we're exposing us to is some basic math. And it's what we call epigenetics. See, genes plus the environment, that can be diet, lifestyle, and environmental exposures, equals genetic expression. one of the best examples I've heard is think of it like a light switch. Don't mean to scare anyone, but as you said here today, every person on this webinar has cancer genes. It's just the reality. We all have them. The question is, what do we, based upon our genetic code, have to eat? What kind of lifestyle do we need to live? And what kind of environments do we need to avoid in order to avoid that light switch from getting turned on? Because the last thing any of us want is to have that unnecessary, or not unnecessary, but that unfortunate diagnosis of cancer. Well, the reality is we don't know the answer to that yet. But we do know that it is tied to this law of epigenetics, which is in essence, if you take your genes and you expose those genes to a certain environment, it will result in certain diseases expressing themselves, like cancer and things like that. So, that's kind of the law. But this isn't applying just to disease. It applies to a lot of other aspects of genetics as well, as we already have these things in us. And what we expose ourselves to, or the lifestyle that we choose, or the food that we choose to consume, will either turn these things on or turn these things off. So let's understand the numbers. What is the significance component of understanding the genome? First, the human genome is roughly 3 billion nucleotides long with 23,000 genes. Yeah, that's roughly, where we are. We have 3 billion nucleotides inside of us, 23,000 genes. The human genome was sequenced in 2003 for a cost of right at $2.7 billion. Took 15 years to make that happen. So, we are now, I guess, going into our 16th year of having this thing. What's interesting is in that time period, we've gone from 15 years to now being able to do a full genome analysis in about 24 hours. The cost to do full genome just for the lab is still roughly, around $1,000. So if you wanted to actually have that done and get your full genome sequence, there's going to be a substantial cost there. Now, I will warn you, there are companies out there that are doing it for much cheaper than, what it actually cost. But those companies are usually tied to the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, or some other company that is basically buying the data behind it. And it is that data that is the value proposition for those companies. So they are actually selling the test, if you will, for below cost in order to get your information. So be careful when you're trying to use that type of information. 2% of your entire genome contains the actual genes that make you up. Each person has roughly 5 million SNPs. So of the 3 billion nucleotides, you have about 5 million SNPs within your genome. The location is random luck, as we will see here in just a second. But let's get some interesting facts. If you wanted to read your genome out loud, and you could read one base, remember those bases are those letters that we talked about, and you were going to read one base per second, how long would it take you to read it? Well, 95 years. If you're a speed reader, maybe you can get it done in 90. But the reality is it is long. There's a lot of connectors there. It's going to take you a long time to read that. In fact, if you wanted to travel around the world and you wanted to see how many times you could actually get around the world with your nucleotides at 1 inch per, how many times could you travel around the Earth? 2 times. That's how big this is. So you can see why initially it was $2.7 billion and why it took 15 years. But the reality is now that computers are as fast as they are, we can do it much, much faster. So one of the other things that people learned in school is about chromosomes. We have 23. If you're male or female, obviously you have the X or the Y. But the other chromosomes are what make us who we are. They are called the karyotypes. It's kind of the visual expression, if you will. That is the human karyotype. And then, of course, dogs, cats, horses, pigs, living organisms have their own karyotype as well. But this is the human karyotype, just in a pictorial. One of the things that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, though, in this presentation was Gregor Mendel. He is the father of genetics. What's interesting about this monk from the 1800s is he was doing his research on peas. He did that research over about a 7-year period, published his findings in a very obscure journal, and they went unread and unrecognized for decades before they were actually discovered. And they found out that this monk, who unfortunately got promoted as the head of his abbey and had so much administrative work he could not continue his research and never published anything again, was absolutely correct and verified, and has since become the father of genetics. It's only amazing, amazing what he did with just peas as a gardener with no formal training. But one of the main things that he was focused on was genetic expression, something that we talk about in the form of genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the DNA base pair sequence that is analyzed. That's the raw data of the molecular genetic report. But you also have the phenotype, and that's the observable component. That's eye color, hair color, tall, short, etc. In fact, when you actually break it down, genotype would be that code at the top. That's kind of your brown eye code, if you will. The phenotype is, hey, you have brown eyes. That's neat. But to actually understand how that happened, how you ended up with brown eyes and the randomness associated with it, what you have to look is how these things work together. Because what Mendel found when he was mixing his peas and doing all the various things was that when you take one associated trait and then you take another associated trait, in this case yellow and or green, there is going to be a dominant and there's going to be a recessive. And when you fertilize those together, 75% of the time the dominant gene will express, 25% of the time the recessive gene will express. So that, if you happen to be, somebody with brown eyes, but, your parents both have, or you have a parent with blue eyes and a parent with brown eyes, and you got the brown, and you're about to have a child, and you're like, well, I know I have both brown and blue in me. The question is, my husband has blue eyes. What are my chances? Well, brown being dominant, you have about a 25% chance of your child being blue-eyed. This is how people, two people with brown hair can have a blonde child and things like that. It's the luck of the draw, if you will, of which gene expresses itself in your genome. So, very simplistic explanation of a very complex issue, but wanted to at least give you that. So where are we currently? How are we using the human genome information that we're learning? Well, first, it's just a better understanding of disease. How it's happening, what is turning these genes on and off, insights into where we came from, origin. You see all kinds of things now with ancestry and things of that nature. I will tell you that science is still very new. There's still some evolution that needs to take place there. And some justification with regard to what that information is and what's happening there. The other aspect of what's happening is greater insights into cognitive function based upon DNA and how that cognitive function is working. In addition, we have personalized medicine and pharmacogenetics. The interesting aspect of pharmacogenetics is that we are literally going to, in the next 15 to 20 years, have pharmaceuticals and the like that are specific to the individual, that are made for you based upon your genetic code. That's kind of where we're headed. The other obvious aspect of what we're identifying is the susceptibility to disease. You have BRCA1, BRCA2 being probably the most recognized because of the decisions that some women are making to have voluntary mastectomies based upon the presence of BRCA1 or BRCA2. So, we are headed in a direction that is unique, that is new. But, in essence, what we first need to understand is what makes you you. Because if you have that understanding, then you can better understand how you can take the information that you get from your genes and what to do with them. So when I say that, most people think this right here. They very well may think, okay, I have a family tree. That family tree is who makes me who I am. I look at my grandparents, I look at my parents, I look at my great-grandparents, and I work my way back in my family tree, and all of those combinations are what make me me. Well, that's part of the answer. But see, what we need to appreciate and understand that genes are only a part of our story. Because when you actually look at the whole picture, your genes are basically kind of your building block. They're kind of your foundation, if you will. But what really makes you you, what really is the house that makes you you, are your choices in diet and lifestyle and environment and stress and sleep and joint and bone health and medical history and medical conditions and pharmaceutical and over-the-counter drugs that you use. We can have the best genes in the world. We could have won the genetic lottery. But if we choose diet and lifestyle that's not, conducive to our genetic makeup, or expose ourselves to an environment that causes our genetic code to basically rebel against us, then, we have issues, we have problems, and we need to address that and understand that genetic code is just as important as the choices that we're making on a daily basis on how we're reacting to those things. So what did we do at IdeaLife? At IdeaLife, we just launched DNA. We already had a personalized assessment that goes in and asks you about your personal information, your medical history, kind of things that you're worried about, the stress in your life, the joint and bone health. We also asked about, your lifestyle and, how your fitness is, and the over-the-counter and prescription drugs that you're taking. And now we've added the genetics component through a partnership with molecular labs where, they basically do all the testing and provide you a report, and then that report becomes actionable. The biggest complaint that a lot of people have in this space, and I personally have bitched about it for a long time, to be perfectly frank, is the fact that you get these really glossy reports, but you can't do anything with it. They're neat information. You take that information and you basically look at it for 15 or 20 minutes and then throw it in a desk drawer. And what we wanted to do at IdeaLife is we wanted to give you a report as part of that DNA test that you could actually put into action. Most importantly, we wanted to make sure that we could maximize the effort from a nutritional and a fitness standpoint so that you could get the right fitness program, the right nutritional program to fit your genetic sequence so you can stop fighting your body and start working with your body so that you can get the results that you're looking for. In fact, as you can see, we added the little DNA button down on the assessment. What kind of information is contained within that report? Well, you have information on, and this is categorized, I think there's 37 total things that are in there, but carbohydrates and fats, individualized vitamin micronutrient needs, alcohol and caffeine sensitivities, lactose intolerance, muscle performance, inflammatory response, post-exercise recovery, recovery nutrition, and injury risk. And again, these are categorized. There are other aspects that are in the report in more detail. But the main thing that we wanted to do was to address this issue. And if you can associate with this or know anybody that can associate with this, then you know exactly what it is I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about here is I've tried everything. I did the diet that my friend did. She got amazing results. Didn't work for me. I did the workout just like the trainer told me to, and you know what? I gained weight. Why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? The problem is there's nothing wrong with you. The problem is the diet and the exercise program wasn't designed for you. See, we have certain makeups in our body, and the way that we're made up will determine how we respond to certain diets and certain exercise routines. And we've evolved in our understanding of the genetic code to be able to provide some insight into that information to give people kind of a roadmap or an owner's manual, if you will, on what they need to do personally to get the results they're looking for. So let's look at an example. Body weight and weight regain is one of the things that is triggered in this platform. It's something that we cover within the nutrition and fitness report that you get. The FTO gene is the gene that encodes for fat mass and obesity. It's all associated with the creation of proteins. And variants associated with this gene are the people at risk for being overweight and having increased body fat. And a mutation in the MC4R gene represents the most common monogenic association with human obesity, and those FTO variants found in about 42% of people. So if we actually look at the genes in order to get to the information that we provide in the report, what you find is we're actually looking at 4 different genes, because it's not just the gene, it's not just the FTO gene and whether or not you have a variant there. The science has evolved now that we have to look at other genes within the genome to find the associations. Like, for instance, NMB codes with the neuro, whatever that is, it's basically your satiety. The LEPR gene mutates and can prevent the receptor from responding to leptin, and the MC4R codes for a protein called melanocortin 4 receptor, found in the highest density in the hypothalamus in the area associated with appetite and satiety. So what does all this mean? What basically all of this means, and as we go through this and we start to explain to people how they're genetically made up, is this. If you have a variant here, you have a reduced satiety response to food. So we've made it really simple for folks. Do you need to understand, that you have a genetic marker in the MC4R? No. Do you need to understand that you have a variant in the FTO? Well, you need to know that you have it, but you don't need to necessarily understand that aspect of it. What you need to understand is you have a reduced satiety response to food. So what does that mean? How can I make this actionable? And that's what this is all about. Simple. If you have this genetic variant, and I will tell you, I have this variant. This is very near and dear to my heart. I don't care how much you work out. Okay, I don't care how much time you spend at the gym, how many miles you run on a treadmill. If you sit down to eat, okay, and you have your plate of food, the leptin response, which basically it's the hormone in your body that tells your brain, hey, I'm full. Okay, so you have leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin is I'm hungry, leptin is I'm full. Your leptin response is reduced. Average person takes about 20 minutes for that leptin response to hit the brain. Most people eat in less than 10. You can see now why we overeat in this country. A lot of us members of the Clean the Plate Club. And if you don't know what that means, then congratulations. If you do, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, because yes, you had to sit there until you finished your plate. And unfortunately, that is one of the big reasons for obesity in this country. But when you sit back and think about it, what this really means is the best way for me to work with my body as opposed to against my body is to change the way that I present food to myself. So in other words, if I take my time and eat, and I can increase the time I take to eat a meal, say for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, if I break it up into courses so that I have an appetizer and a salad and then a main course, and they're not all sitting on one plate, and I actually have to put the fork down between bites, and I have to get up to get the next course, and it's not all sitting right in front of me. I've increased my chances of feeling full when I actually am full, as opposed to genetically the way that I'm made up and I have this reduced satiety response, and all of a sudden my plate is clean, and then all of a sudden I get that miserable feeling of, man, I just overate. And I'm sure there's not a single person out there that can associate with that kind of feeling like I can. And yeah, I'm being a bit sarcastic there, because the reality is more than 40% of the population is dealing with this issue. And the way that most of us have been trained to deal with this issue is, well, you just got to work harder in the gym. You need to hit that gym harder. The reality is the gym is not going to have any impact or effect on the fact that you have an FTO variant. It just isn't. What you're going to have to do to get the results that you're looking for is you're going to have to change the way that you eat. Not necessarily change what you eat, but change the way that you eat. Because the reality is most people, the biggest problem they have is they are overeating. Remember, the average calorie consumption in this country now is over 2,500 calories. The RDA percentage is based upon 2,000. If we could reduce our calorie consumption by 500 calories, remember, 500 means 3,500 per week. 3,500 per week is a pound. So think about that for a second. Could it really be that easy? Could it be that I simply basically break this up into courses? Could it be that I slow down? Could it be that I put my fork down between bites? Could it be that I could actually start losing a pound a week simply by, instead of creating a plate of food, coursing it out and having more time to eat, maybe more conversation at the table with your family, and as a result, getting the results I'm looking for without having to kill myself in the gym. That is what's happening. As we better understand the genetic code and the genetic sequence, people are going to start getting these results. That's what this is all about. That's why IdeaLife has moved into this category and partnered with molecular labs to get this kind of information in your hands so that you're getting the information you need so that you can make the decisions that you need to make and make the modifications to your habits so that you can get the results that you've only dreamed of. In addition, we have other aspects of the genetic code that we're looking at as well. As you can see, there is a genetic test summary out there that shows all the different markers that we're looking at within this code, within this test, the nutrition and fitness test that we're providing. At the end of the day, what we wanted to do with this advancement is to put the power of genetics, put the power of your makeup, your diet, lifestyle, and environmental conditional exposures and things in the power of your hand. It's as simple as getting the information and then applying that information to your daily habits so that you can always get the results that you're looking for. And in fact, when you actually kind of tie it all out together, what you understand is we really are tying it all together because we take into consideration your gender, your age, your genetics, your epigenetics. What are you exposing yourself to? What kind of toxins are you exposing yourself to? What kind of job do you have? What kind of stress do you have in your life? All these make a big difference. We're understanding that the microbiome or our gut health is so critically important. As that science evolves and we learn that more and more disease, especially chronic and inflammatory disease, is coming from our gut and our lack of probiotics and prebiotics that we're feeding our body, it becomes ultra important. And then, of course, our lack of nutrients. These nutritional deficiencies that we have are causing all kinds of havoc and problems on our bodies together. But when you actually take all of that together and you provide people the information that they're looking for, what you provided them is their personalized owner's manual. Because see, when you put it all into one place, you're going to get a free health score from IdeaLife. It's just take the assessment. It's really that simple. We call it JTTA. Just take the assessment. You're going to get this score for free. You're also going to get a free diet and lifestyle report. It's going to show you the decisions that you're making and those that are positive and those that are negatively impacting your life based upon, what's helping, what's hurting, things that you can change. The genetics component is going to give you that nutrition and fitness genetics report that's going to show you how your diet and lifestyle should be decided based upon your genetic makeup, not on today's fad or what your friends are doing or what necessarily you believe is the case based upon a belief system. No, it's how are you genetically made up, and then follow that and see the results that you get. In addition, we have the personalized vitamin program that helps fill those nutritional gaps and voids that you have. And then, of course, we have a why for everything. That why tells you exactly why you need to be doing the things that you're doing with science to back it up. At the end of the day, the whole idea behind what IdeaLife exists for and is doing is to find that missing puzzle piece for you. Connect the dots. We want everyone to have the information that they need so that they can get the results that they've always looked for. It's a shame that you have a multi-billion-dollar industry out there, and I'm talking about the weight loss industry, that is promising results, and some of them you get the results, but what ends up happening is you regain the weight. The whole idea behind this genetic report is not only is it going to show you the best diet and macronutrient breakdown for you, but it's also going to show your susceptibility to weight regain, which is directly tied to how your body reacts to food and how you react to your impulses for food. And most importantly, how we can change our daily habits to work with our body as opposed to against our body in the hopes that we can avoid that inflammatory response, which is causing so much havoc in our gut and other places. It's all about healthy lifestyle. And there's a lot of different things associated with a healthy lifestyle, from motivation to weight control to the consciousness of understanding these various aspects of things and giving you the information so that you can make informed choice, to general wellness, to medical care. We don't want to work against anybody. We want to work with you. to get you the results you're looking for. And that's what Ideal Life stands for. And to be real, that's where we're headed. It's getting back to the individual. It's understanding that each person is unique and giving the unique individual exactly what they need to get the results they've always wanted.